National age. Like the 18th century, it was unwise for a man of learning to talk about wild sights and strange scenes under a Congo moon, of the gigantic walls and pillars of a forgotten city, crumbling and vine-grown, and of the damp, silent stone steps leading interminably down into the darkness of abysmal treasure vaults and inconceivable catacombs. Especially was it unwise to rave of the living things that might haunt such a place, of creatures, half of the jungle, half of the impiously aged city, fabulous creatures which even a Pliny might describe with skepticism, things that might have sprung up after the great apes had overturned the dying city with walls and the pillars, the vaults, and the weird carvings. Yet, after he came home for the last time, Sir Wade would speak of such matters with a shudderingly uncanny zest, mostly after his third glass at the Knight's Head, boasting of what he had found in the jungle and how he had dwelt among terrible ruins known only to him. And finally, he had spoken of the living things in such a manner that he was taken to the madhouse. He had shown little regret when he shut into the barred room at the Huntington, for his mind moved curiously. Ever since his son had commenced to grow out of infancy, he had liked his home less and less, till at last he had seemed to dread it. The Knight's Head had been his headquarters, and when he was confined, he expressed some vague gratitude, as if for protection. 3 years later, he died. Wade, Jermyn's son, Philip, was a highly peculiar person. Despite a strong physical resemblance to his father, his appearance and conduct were in many particulars so coarse that he was universally shunned. Though he did not inherit the madness which was feared by some, he was densely stupid, and given to brief periods of uncontrollable violence. In frame, he was small, but intensely powerful, and was of incredible agility. 12 years after succeeding to his title, he married the daughter of his gameskeeper, a person said to be of gypsy extract, but before his son was born, joined the Navy as a common sailor, and completing the general disgust which his habits and misalliance had begun after the close of the American War, he was heard of as a sailor on a merchantman in the African trade, having a kind of reputation for feats of strength and of climbing, but finally disappearing one night as the ship lay off the Congo coast. And the son of Sir Philip, Jermyn, the now accepted family, peculiarly took a strange and fatal turn. Tall and fairly handsome, with a sort of weird Eastern grace, despite certain slight oddities of proportion, Robert Jermyn began life as a scholar, an investigator. It was he who first studied scientifically the vast collections of relics which his mad grandfather had brought from Africa, and who made the family name as celebrated in ethnology as an exploration. In 1815, Sir Robert married a daughter of the 7th Viscount Brightholme, Anne was subsequently blessed with 3 children, the eldest and youngest of whom were never publicly seen on account of deformities in mind and body. Saddened by these family misfortunes, the scientist sought relief in work and made 2 long expeditions in the interior of Africa. In 1849, his second son, Neville, a singularly repellent person who seemed to combine the surliness of Philip Jermyn with the hauteur of the Bright Holmes, ran away with a vulgar dancer, but was pardoned upon his return in the following year. He came back to Jermyn House, a widower with an infant son, Alfred, who was one day to be the father of Arthur Jermyn. Friends said that it was this series of griefs which unhinged the mind of Sir Robert Jermyn, yet it was probably merely a bit of African folklore which caused the disaster. The elderly scholar had been collecting legends of the Onga tribes near the field of his grandfathers and his own explorations, hoping in some way to account for Sir Wade's wild tales of a lost city peopled by strange hybrid creatures. A certain constancy in the strange papers of his ancestors suggested that the madman's imagination might have been stimulated by native myths. On October 19th, 1852, the explorer Samuel Seton called at Jermyn House with a manuscript of notes collected among the Ongas, believing that certain legends of a gray city of white apes ruled by a white god might prove valuable to the ethnologist. In his conversation, he probably supplied many additional details, the nature of which will never be known, since a hideous series of tragedies suddenly burst into being. When Sir Robert Jermyn emerged from his library, he left behind the strangled corpse of the explorer, and before he could be restrained, had put an end to all three of his children, the two who were never seen, and the son who had run away. Neville Jermyn died in the successful defense of his own 2-year-old son, who had apparently been included in the old man's madly murderous scheme. Sir Robert himself, after repeated attempts at suicide and a stubborn refusal to utter an articulate sound, died of apoplexy in the 2nd year of his confinement. Now, there's nothing wrong with relating the strange, and even relating of evil in order to, shed some light on the subject to actually address it. But if you're speaking of what you consider evil for mere entertainment, there's, some problem there. Sir Alfred Jermyn was a baronet before his 4th birthday, but his taste never matched his title. At 20, he had joined a band of musical hall performers, and at 36 had deserted his wife and child to travel with an itinerant. Well, internet's more common of a word nowadays, but that's not what we're spelling. American circus. His end was very revolting. Among the animals in the exhibition with which he traveled was a huge bull gorilla, a brighter color than the average, a surprisingly tractable beast, of much popularity with the performers. With this gorilla, Alfred Jermyn was singularly fascinated, and on many occasions the two would eye each other for long periods through intervening bars. Eventually, Jermyn asked and obtained permission to train the animal, astonishing audiences and fellow performers alike with his success. One morning in Chicago, as the gorilla and Alfred Jermyn were rehearsing an exceedingly clever boxing match, the former delivered a blow of more than usual force, hurting both the body and the dignity of the amateur trainer. Of what followed, members of the greatest show on earth do not like to speak. They did not expect to hear Sir Alfred Jermyn emit a shrill, inhuman scream, or to see him seize his clumsy antagonist with both hands, dash it to the floor of the cage, and bite fiendishly at its hairy throat. The gorilla was off its guard, but not for long, and before anything could be done by the regular trainer, the body, which had belonged to a baronet, was past recognition. And nowadays, instead of itinerant circuses, we have Arcturians and their internet followers. Well, they call themselves Arcturians, which means bear trainers, which is basically calling themselves circus folk, but that's not as relevant as some people might. It's not relevant